Unai Emery's time at Arsenal was meant to be a break from the division and despair Arsenal fans had felt at the end of Arsène Wenger's reign. Undoubtedly an Arsenal legend, by 2018, Wenger's Arsenal had failed to win the league in 14 years, failed to win the Champions League ever, or even reach a final in 12 years, and had failed to qualify for the competition for 2 seasons in a row. With the immediate goal of returning to Europe's premier competition, Emery was hired, but he failed to accomplish this and was sacked not long into his second season. This interregnum, then, becomes an interesting piece of history to analyse, and that's what we'll be doing today, by looking at every signing the Spaniard made while in charge of Arsenal. We'll look at how their career had gone when they were signed, how they performed in North London, and what happened to them after that. Some ground rules. Loan players will be counted, but players signed for the academy will not. Let's dive in. Stefan Lichtsteiner, retired. Stefan Lichtsteiner is an extraordinarily decorated player, but no one had come to symbolise the rot that Arsenal fans felt like they were experiencing under Emery more than him. The right back was a graduate of the Academy of Grasshopper in his native Switzerland, making his debut for them in the penultimate game of the 01-02 season. The fact he was playing football that long ago probably says enough on its own, as we shall see. The next year, he broke into the first team properly as a rotation player as they won the Swiss title, and he became the undoubted first choice in the position in the next 2 seasons, earning him a move to Lille in Ligue 1. He made the step up to France and the Champions League well, and was again a regular starter in his first season, and made his debut for Switzerland the next, although he was used less often that term. The next season, he was a much more regular starter, and also started every game for Switzerland at their home Euro 2008. That was enough to earn a €1.5 million move to Lazio, and he spent 3 seasons in the Italian capital as the main starter in his position for club and country, winning a Coppa Italia in his first season, and also playing in the 2010 World Cup. A €10 million move to Juventus came after that, and he instantly made the position his own in a juggernaut that would dominate the 2010s in Italian football, as Lichtsteiner won 7 Scudettos in a row, 4 of them as part of League and Cup doubles, and would play the entirety of the Champions League final loss to Barcelona in 2015. He was also a main part of the Switzerland squad in the 2014 World Cup, and was given the armband before Euro 2016. However, at the club level, things would slow down for him after that. The signings of Dani Alves and Juan Cuadrado gave him more competition, and also inflated the old ladies' squad so much that he was left out of its list for the Champions League group stage. Though he still started more often than not in Serie A and was re-added to the squad for the UCL knockouts, he only made 1 appearance in the competition, sitting out the final with Andrea Barzagli preferred as they lost to Real Madrid. Lichtsteiner stayed for the next season, and was still deployed often as he won his 7th Italian title, a record for a foreign player, and went to the World Cup in Russia with Switzerland. His contract ran out that season, and it was this Lichtsteiner, with a decade and a half of football under his belt, that Arsenal picked up. The Gunners already had a right back in Hector Bellerin, but the Spaniard was considered stronger going forward than he was defensively, and this also gave him needed competition. Unfortunately, Bellerin was kept out by 2 long-term injuries, and the Gunners felt it. With Emery sometimes playing a back 5, having Lichtsteiner at right wing-back truly was a sight for sore eyes. But only for Arsenal's opponents, as turning 35 as he did during the season, his legs had gone, and he failed to contribute meaningfully to the attack, while also looking unimpressive in defence as well. He was rotated with Ainsley Maitland-Niles, who looked similarly hopeless out of position. Often one would perform badly, be switched for the other, and the cycle would continue. After just 1 season at the club, he left on a free to Augsburg in the Bundesliga. He was a rotation player in Bavaria, staying in the Switzerland squad too, although after COVID-19 and the suspension and then restart of the season, he played just 3 more times and retired from football. It's a shame because if not for the pandemic, he could have bowed out with 1 last Euros for his country, which he won 108 caps for, many of them as captain. As it happened, Euro 2020 actually took place in 2021, by which time a 37-year-old Lichtsteiner's time was definitively over. He became an assistant manager at his country's under-18s for a year, before a season as manager for Basel's under-15 and then under-16 squads. In 2024, he took up his first senior role at Westfalen Bonstetten in the Swiss 4th tier, leading them to a promotion playoff, which they lost in the semi-final to Lausanne's under-21s, and through the qualifiers to the main stage of the Swiss club, where they lost 2-1 at home to top-tier side Winterthur. From Champions League finals and 7 straight Serie A titles to managing a fourth-tier side in front of an 800-capacity stadium must be a significant culture shock, and it's not a path that former superstars usually take. His name is spoken with a shudder by Arsenal fans, for whom he symbolises the doomed period between Wenger and Arteta like no other. But outside of that, he is a legend for Juventus and his country, and it's a bit odd to see him slumming it out in Switzerland's fourth tier. Bernd Leno, Fulham. Unlike Lichtsteiner, Bernd Leno's name carries significant goodwill amongst Arsenal fans, despite him coming in for the Emery years and being shuffled on by Mikel Arteta before the team became serious contenders again. Leno was a youth product of Stuttgart and played for their second team in the German third tier, and in 2011 he was loaned to Bayer Leverkusen, made their number one immediately, and quickly upgraded to a permanent. He spent 7 seasons as the undisputed number one of Die Werkself, ending the fifth with his first Germany cap and a spot at Euro 2016, although he was benched for the tournament's duration, and earned 5 more caps in the remainder of the season, including one at the last ever Confederations Cup, which Germany won. He often wore the armband for Leverkusen, especially in his latter years, and it took Arsenal £22.5 million to get his services. He was a massive hit amongst Arsenal fans, quickly unseating Petr Cech to be the Gunners' number one. Bizarrely, Emery refused to use him in the Cups, preferring a now-finished Cech, even in the Europa League final, which defined the season, as Arsenal lost 4-1. Fans have looked back on that as a real mistake by Emery, which shows the high regard Leno was held in. He stayed Arsenal number one for the next season, even after Emery was sacked and replaced by Mikel Arteta. Despite his injury in the second game back after the COVID break and the strong performances of Emiliano Martinez in his absence, Arteta decided to stick with Leno for the 2021 season, where Arsenal were pretty bad, but Leno returned to the Germany squad, making the Euros. However, in 21-22, he was unseated by Aaron Ramsdale, spending the whole season on the bench, making just 8 token appearances. Too good to not be a starter, he was sold to Fulham for £8 million, which to me is a ridiculous bargain, and has spent the last 3 seasons as their first-choice goalie, and he often donned the armband when Tom Cairney and Anthony Robinson were absent. In my opinion, he is probably Fulham's best player at present. One place he has not recovered from his replacing at the Emirates is internationally, with his last cap for Germany, who are perhaps the most blessed nation in the world when it comes to goalies, coming in 2021. Leno made some ridiculous saves in an Arsenal jersey and was generally considered one of their best players as they found it under Emery. The prevailing narrative seems to be that he was a great shot stopper but replaced because he was too old-fashioned to play the possession game, with Ramsdale preferred for his distribution and passing, and most fans accepted this decision. However, Leno didn't really do anything wrong, and he is still liked by Gooners. Socrates Papastatopoulos, retired. Papastatopoulos came through the academy of AEK Athens, making his debut for them in the Greek Cup in 2005. With 2 appearances in that competition, the centre-back was sent on loan to second-tier Niki Volos for the second half of the 05-06 season to get regular football, which he did. He broke into the AEK first team in the second half of the 06-07 campaign and the whole of the 07-08 season, breaking into the Greece squad in the latter, earning his first 3 caps. He was brought by Genoa, making sporadic appearances in the first season, but being a regular starter in the second, which he capped off by playing in the 2010 World Cup. He then went to AC Milan for rights to other players valued at a collective €14 million, but spent a season on the bench, playing just 7 times for the Rossinieri before a deal between Genoa and Milan had the deal reversed, although Genoa paid €1 million less. He was back at Genoa, though instantly loaned to Werder Bremen, who interestingly used him as a right-back in the first half of the campaign, before reverting to type in the second. More importantly, he was a regular starter again, including for Greece at Euro 2012. The Green Whites then bought him outright for €5 million, where he spent another season as a first-team regular, and was sold to Borussia Dortmund for €9.5 million. He had a great first season with them, becoming a regular starter due to injuries elsewhere, being named in the Bundesliga Team of the Season and playing every minute with Greece at the 2014 World Cup. Injuries hurt him a bit the next season, but the one after that he was fit, and again a regular starter for BVB, and spent the next 2 seasons doing the same, often donning the armband in his final term. By 2018, when he joined Arsenal, he was considered one of the best defenders in the Bundesliga. However, he is much closer in perception to Lichtsteiner than Leno when it comes to Emery-era players by Arsenal fans. That season, he was a regular starter, including playing in the Europa League final. But though unlike Lichtsteiner, Premier League fans sometimes saw the best of Papastatopoulos, especially in his first few months at the Emirates, his partnership with Shkodran Mustafi was very unsure. Unlike Lichtsteiner, he stuck around for the 1920 season, but after Emery was sacked, Mikel Arteta did not use him nearly as much, with him managing 3 minutes in 2 games after the resumption of football following the COVID pandemic and losing his place in the Greece squad. One of those, incidentally, was the FA Cup final, but if there was any doubt left over whether Arteta rated him, he left him out of his 2021 squad entirely, and his contract was cancelled in the winter, allowing him to return to his homeland to play for Olympiacos, where he earned a spot back in the starting 11 as they won the title. He was a regular starter as they won the title the next season too, and was often captain the season after that. His contract expired and he moved to Real Betis in La Liga, where he managed 16 appearances, mostly as a starter. Impressive at his advanced age for a top half team in one of the best leagues in the world. After that season, he retired and has stayed out of the limelight since. I think most Arsenal fans remember him as a lumbering oaf, but that's not too fair. At the early stages of Emery's tenure, there was a lot of optimism, and he put in some fine performances before Papastatopoulos in particular, and Arsenal in general, got worse, and he was quickly deemed surplus to requirements by Mikel Arteta, who, like Leno would soon find out, had no time for old-school defensive players who were limited with the ball. For what it's worth, he gave an interesting interview with the Greek website England 365, which is about English football. He says he felt the club unfairly sacked Emery, which is understandable given his minutes plummeted after the Spaniard left, but stopped short of criticising Mikel Arteta, instead saying that he still harbours good feelings to Arsenal and that it was his dream to play in the Premier League, ranking it the best league he's played in. For someone that played in all four of the top leagues in the world and made 90 caps for his country, he has a bit of a sad reputation in England, but can console himself with the fact he is loved at Borussia Dortmund, where his real high points came. Lucas Torreira, Galatasaray. I alluded to the optimism of Emery's early months withering away in the last part, and perhaps no one encapsulates that feeling like Lucas Torreira. Torreira left his native Uruguay to join the academy of Pescara and broke into their team near the end of the 2014-15 season, even playing in the playoffs which they drew with Bologna, although Bologna were promoted given their higher finish in the regular season. He was then bought by Sampdoria for €1.5 million, but loaned back to Pescara for the season, where he played pretty frequent football in the Italian second tier, starting both legs of the playoff final, with his side this time going up. Now in the top flight, albeit with his parent club again, the defensive-minded midfielder was among the first names on the team sheet for the next 2 seasons, breaking into the Uruguay squad near the end of the second and impressing at the 2018 World Cup in Russia, where his country reached the quarter-finals. For that reason, it cost Arsenal around £27 million for his services, and he was fantastic, with Arsenal fans serenading him with the same chant they used to sing to club legend and former captain Patrick Vieira, with a memorable goal in the North London derby, topping off a season where he was among the first names on the team sheet, and he also played for Uruguay in the Copa America at the end of it. Torreira looked decidedly less good in the 1920 campaign, and after an ankle injury ended his season, or so he thought, he was given a reprieve thanks to COVID. However, Mikel Arteta limited his use after the restart, and he was benched for the FA Cup final. Arteta did not consider Torreira a part of his long-term project, signing Thomas Partey, and loaned him to Atletico Madrid, where he got 26 appearances but only 5 starts, bagging a La Liga medal. He was also a bench option at the Copa America. Another loan came to Fiorentina after that, where he was a much more used option, before being sold to Galatasaray for €6 million, where he started regularly as they won a Turkish title, and sat the whole of the 2022 World Cup on the Uruguay bench, and by the end of the season, his place in the squad was lost altogether. He spent 2 more seasons as a regular starter in the Galatasaray midfield, and has now won back-to-back-to-back Turkish championships. He was also called up to the Uruguay squad for the first time since the 2022 World Cup in June, but didn't come off the bench in a World Cup qualifier against Venezuela. Torreira remains a massive what-if, as he looked stellar in the first few months, but like the rest of the Emery project, slowly fizzled out before being shuffled on by Arteta, and there seems to be suggestions he was homesick due to issues at home in his last months before being loaned. Notable for his diminutive frame, that made him a cult favourite but probably worked against him in physical midfield battles, he has found a fitting home in Galatasaray, where he wins Turkish leagues for fun, albeit not quite at the level we saw glimpses of at Arsenal. Matteo Guendouzi, Lazio. Another midfielder, Guendouzi remains one of the more enigmatic characters in the European game. He came through the ranks at Lorient, becoming part of the first team squad in the 16-17 season, before really making his name for the Ligue 2 side the season after that. A fee starting at £7 million brought him to the Emirates, and the teenager was given a baptism of fire, being placed straight into Arsenal's midfield, where he operated as one of two defensive midfielders with Torreira. Despite his young age, he certainly didn't look out of place, although he did not stand out, being used off the bench for the Europa League final. In 1920, he was one of the first names on Emery's team sheet, but another one that saw his playing time massively curtailed under Arteta. After the COVID restart, he played the first two games, but after a fight with Neil Maupay in the loss to Brighton, after Maupay injured Leno, he was exiled from the Arsenal squad. This was not the first issue with Guendouzi, who had a bust-up with a teammate in a training camp in Dubai, and then got in trouble during a music event in front of Emirati sponsors, where he enjoyed the song so much he pulled off his shirt, waving it about, offending some of those in the conservative Muslim country. After the Brighton incident, a meeting was held, but Guendouzi's attitude in said meeting was said to be the final nail in his coffin. He was sent on loan to Hertha Berlin, whose manager described his attitude as being like someone going through puberty, which, to be fair, Guendouzi literally was. A regular starter, he was then moved to Marseille on loan, who he played every game for, and it was in this time he earned his first France caps, making OM sign him permanently for £9 million. He again played every game for them and was also named in the France squad for the 2022 World Cup, where Le Bleu came second. He then got a loan to Lazio, where he was again a regular starter, before that was upgraded to a permanent, where he played basically every game for them, and was in the France squad for the Nations League finals, where they came third. Guendouzi is an interesting character, showing fight, sometimes literally, which is attributed to his self-confessed utter hatred of anything but victory. I don't think Arsenal fans will consider him one that got away, like, say, Serge Gnabry, but he has had a very good career after leaving Arsenal. He did gain experience at a very high level at a very young age there, but his attitude was never going to please Mikel Arteta, who also got rid of Mesut Ozil and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, believing the trio to be too big for their boots. His time at Arsenal, I think, is more forgotten than viewed positively or negatively. Denis Suarez, Villarreal. The only transfer to come in the winter of 2019, Denis Suarez was signed on loan and has become something of a meme because he spent nearly his entire spell injured. Suarez was a Manchester City youth product, but only made two appearances for them in the EFL Cup before being sold to Barcelona in 2013. However, he only made appearances for their B team in the second tier in the 13-14 season before a loan move to Sevilla in 14-15, where the number 10 was a rotation option. He was then sold to Villarreal, who used him more often, mostly on the left, before Barcelona activated his €3.5 million buyback clause. He also got his only Spain cap at the end of that 15-16 season. The season after that, he was a rotation player for Barca, and his already limited minutes declined more in the next season, where Barca pushed on and won a League and Cup double. After just 8 games in the 18-19 season, they decided on a winter loan move to Arsenal, which did seem like a good way to bolster the Gunners' squad as they aimed for a top 4 finish while also fighting in the Europa League. Unfortunately, he made 6 appearances, all off the bench, before picking up a groin injury, making his move completely pointless. Somehow, Barca managed to get €16 million for him from Celta Vigo, where he started regularly when not blighted by small injuries in the first campaign, but had a clean bill of health in the next 2. However, he fell out with the club's eccentric president, Carlos Mourinho, who disputed with Suarez's agent and wanted to sell the midfielder because of his high wages. Suarez had no intention of leaving and was excluded from the Celta Vigo squad, before being sent to Espanyol on loan for the second half of the season, where he was normally a starter. With Espanyol relegated that season, he returned to Villarreal instead. Injuries kept him out of nearly the whole 23-24 season, but he was often used as a bench option the season just gone. Denis Suarez became a meme for Gooners because of his pointless loan spell, echoing Kim Kallstrom a few years prior. He has had a pretty decent, if unremarkable, career, earning a Spain cap at a time they were still reigning European champions, but failing to be a starter at Barcelona, Man City or Arsenal, and instead looking most comfortable playing for teams a level below that, like Villarreal or Celta Vigo. Gabriel Martinelli, Arsenal. Moving on to the 1920 season, and one of only two players that Emery signed to still be in North London, left winger Martinelli came through the ranks at Ituano, playing a few games in the 2018 season, before netting 6 goals in 14 games in the Sao Paulo State Championship, while also playing in Brazil's fourth tier. Arsenal signed him for £6 million, meaning to add him to their academy, but after taking a look at him in training and pre season, realised he was good enough to be sporadically deployed in the first team under both Emery and Arteta, though an injury kept him out of the post COVID restart and the first half of the 2021 season. He returned in the second half, topping it off with an Olympic gold medal in Tokyo. His minutes increased greatly in 21-22, and he earned a place in the Brazil squad for the first time, before a special 22-23 campaign in which he scored 15 goals as the Gunners became title challengers, also going to the World Cup in Qatar. He wasn't quite as effective in 23-24, but ended the season with a trip to Copa America, before scoring 10 goals in the season just gone. Martinelli has 225 appearances and 51 goals for Arsenal, making him one of Emery's most impactful signings. He's been a quality player signed on the cheap, and when he's good, boy is he good. However, his inconsistency has been flagged up, and he's been subject to criticism from Arsenal fans, with the signing of Noni Madueke making him fight for his place, something Raheem Sterling's arrival was meant to do last season. Martinelli's Arsenal story has not yet been fully written, but most Gooners adore him. William Saliba, Arsenal. Martinelli is loved at Arsenal, but Saliba is someone their fans talk about with genuine pride, in the same way that perhaps no one else is at the Emirates. Saliba came through the ranks at Saint Etienne and was their starting centre-back by the end of the 18-19 season, leading to a £27 million move after he made just 19 appearances for them, although they sent him back on loan for 19-20, where he was first name on the team sheet when not injured. Returning to Arsenal and on the bench for the Community Shield, he was kept away from their first team squad, playing 8 games with the under-23s before a winter loan move to Nice, where he looked stellar in Ligue 1. I thought it odd to loan him again, alongside Guendouzi, to Marseille, where he looked too good for the French league already, and he was named Young Player of the Year as well as earning his first France call-up. He would finally return to Arsenal for the 2022-23 season, and was again excellent. Going to the World Cup in Qatar and an injury to him late on in the season is probably why Arsenal threw away the league title that year. The next campaign, he played every minute for Arsenal in the league and for France in the Euros as they reached the semi-finals. The season just gone, he was also an ever-present for the Gunners, an absolute gift for them. His partnership with Gabriel is probably or possibly the best in the world, and Saliba is in the conversation for the individual best centre-back as well. Sophisticated with the ball, he is also good defensively, proving that you don't need one or the other. His mere existence is proof that Arsenal are a big club again, a status that felt like it was slipping under Emery, as one of the best players in the world decides to stay at Emirates Stadium instead of moving on. He is not completely above criticism by some, especially in comparisons with other elite defenders like Virgil van Dijk, but there's no doubt he is among the finest footballers, not just defenders, in the world. Dani Ceballos, Real Madrid. Along with Suarez, the only loan option on this list, Ceballos came through the academy of Real Betis and made his debut in the dying embers of their doomed 13-14 season. With Betis relegated from La Liga, the midfielder had a perfect opportunity, and he got his chance in the second division, playing regular football as the Verde Blancos went back up as champions. Even in La Liga, he started more often than not for 2 seasons, ending up with being named player of the tournament as Spain came second in the Euro under-21s, before Real Madrid signed him for €18 million. He was used very sparingly in his first season as his side won the Champions League, not in the matchday squad for the final. He got used more in the 18-19 season, although still as a rotation player, coming off the bench in the Club World Cup final. He also won his first senior Spain caps, though went to the Euro under-21s, this time winning it, again being in the team of the tournament. It was this exciting youngster who Emery's Arsenal bought on loan, and he looked like a steal, providing 2 assists in his first start at home to Burnley. However, after that, he didn't really stand out, although he was a main starter, apart from an injury which kept him out from November to January. Even after Arteta came in, he still started, with his most notable contribution for the Gunners being a last-minute winner in the FA Cup quarter-final away to Sheffield United, and he played the full game as Arsenal won the final. Arteta brought him on loan for another, mostly forgettable season, where he rotated in and out of the first-team squad. Injured for Euro 2020, his consolation was a place in the Olympics, but he picked up another injury, ruling him out of the first half of the 21-22 season. He stayed at Madrid with very limited minutes, although he did come off the bench as they won the Champions League in the final against Liverpool in Paris. He was used a lot more in the 22-23 season, and in March 2023 he got his first two Spain caps since 2020. However, he was still a rotation player and has not been called up for La Roja since. His minutes declined in 23-24, being on the bench for the whole Champions League knockouts, but he was used more in the season just gone. He's basically just a squad player for Real Madrid, which has entitled him to two Spanish titles, three Champions Leagues, three Club World Cups, and an Intercontinental Cup. His time at Arsenal is remembered quite badly, with most remembering it as he was brilliant against Burnley, but then he was rubbish. It's a bit more complicated than that, but not that much. A mostly forgettable player in Real Madrid's team, and a mostly forgettable one at Arsenal too. Still a good player, to be honest, and it's kind of a shame he's in the capital as he doesn't get to play too much, although he has the trophy cabinet that some players twice as good only dream of. Nicola Pepe, Villarreal. Considered probably the worst transfer in Arsenal history, things weren't all bad with Pepe, but he never even close to live up to his transfer value. Pepe's senior career began in the French fifth tier with Poitiers in the 12-13 season, after which he transferred to Angers, playing for their second team, also in the fifth team, for 2 seasons. However, in the 14-15 campaign, although he made a few token appearances for their first team, who played in Ligue 2 and got promoted in 2015, scoring a hat-trick as the SCO beat ninth tier Jeunes d'Argentré 10-0 in the Coupe de France, he was loaned after that to Orléans in the third division, getting regular football. The right winger returned to Angers, now in Ligue 1, becoming a rotation player and earning his first caps for Côte d'Ivoire, even starting the Coupe de France final, which they lost against PSG, though he spent the whole Africa Cup of Nations on the bench. After this, he went to Lille for €10 million. He impressed, scoring 14 goals. The season after, he was even better, scoring 23 goals and assisting 12 as Lille, a relegation candidate the season before, came second in the league, and topping it off with a run to the Africa Cup of Nations quarterfinals. This was what convinced Arsenal to pay €79 million, or £72 million, a club record at the time, for his services. I must say, I was not too impressed when he came in, but that was mostly because of my ignorance on French football at the time. It's his transfer fee that is key to understanding Pepe's time at Arsenal. Emery expected him to be an absolute marquee player, but he never showed that. He was actually a pretty decent squad player on the wing, but after not showing that much in his first few months, was benched in favour of a more traditional strike partnership of Alexander Lacazette and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who previously held the club's transfer record, with Mesut Ozil behind them. Pepe's playtime actually went up after Emery, who bought into the club, was sacked and replaced by Arteta, and the Ivorian played in the FA Cup final, assisting Aubameyang's winner. He still got 8 goals and 10 assists, which isn't bad, but he was sporadic, inconsistent, with the dreariness clouding the glimpses of quality that we saw, and it was his price tag that rendered him a failure more than anything else. If you don't cost £72 million. Arsenal really weren't great in the first half of the 2021 season, but in the second half, Pepe was amongst their best players, scoring 16 goals that campaign. Unfortunately for Pepe, Bukayo Saka's meteoric rise had just begun, and there was much less need for him the season after that, where he only had 8 starts. He did go to the Africa Cup of Nations, playing in every game. Arsenal then loaned him to Nice for the next season, where he returned to regular football but did not tear up Ligue 1 as he once had, and injuries blighted the second half of his season. Even though he had a year left on his contract, Arsenal gave him to Trabzonspor for free in 2023. He mainly started when fit, but he came off the bench in the Turkish Cup final, scoring a late equaliser against Besiktas before their hearts were broken by Moat Assem Al-Musrati in injury time. The one interruption to this regular playing time was in the Africa Cup of Nations, which his country won, although Pepe spent both the semi-final and the 2-1 final win over Nigeria on the bench. After this, another free transfer to Villarreal followed, where he was a rotation player as the Yellow Submarine qualified for the Champions League. He's just extended his contract and is still included in the Côte d'Ivoire team, but obviously this is not the superstar career he was destined for after those 2 brilliant seasons with Lille, where only Kylian Mbappe scored more goals than him in Ligue 1 in the latter. At Arsenal, he flattered to deceive, although I do see a fair bit of Pepe revisionism, with many saying he was unfairly discarded or his playing time limited. I kind of agree, but to be fair to Mikel Arteta, it's probably been smart to play Bukayo Saka over him. After that, it was a loan to Nice and time in Trabzonspor and Villarreal, where he didn't look bad, but he didn't stand out either. A shame, really. He could have had such a special career. Kieran Tierney, Celtic. Kieran Tierney was an academy product of Celtic, his current club, and got 2 appearances at the end of the 14-15 season. The left back had a breakout campaign in 15-16, ending it as their first choice in the position as the boys won the title, and was named Scotland's Young Player of the Year, also earning his first senior cap. He was Young Player of the Year again the next season, although he missed a third of the campaign with injury, as Celtic won a league and cup double, and he provided 12 assists from defence. In 17-18, it was a domestic treble and a third consecutive Young Player of the Year gong, as he made 11 more assists. Another domestic treble came the season after that, and he was first name on the team sheet when not injured. Having won everything he could in Scotland every year, he went to Arsenal for a reported £25 million. He may be one of the most well-liked Arsenal players among the Gunners faithful. When Tierney came to Arsenal, he was actually on the treatment table, having received groin surgery and missed the end of his last season with Celtic. When he returned, he was often used by Emery, but then another shoulder injury kept him out for the rest of the season, until the COVID break offered a reprieve. Mikel Arteta liked the Scot, although moved him about from a left wing-back to a left centre-back in the Gunners' back five. Tierney played the entirety of the FA Cup final and stayed mostly fit in the 2021 season, and I remember a lot of the burden being placed on him going forward, being seen as a very modern, attack-minded fullback. With the issues around Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, many Arsenal fans liked him and thought of him as a potential captain, although this was something I never personally endorsed. As well as often being injured, Tierney was a bit of a shy, unassuming character. He topped off the season with an appearance at Euro 2020. In 21-22, he was first name of the team sheet, but knee surgery made him miss the last couple of months of the season. By 22-23, Arteta had had enough and brought Alexander Zinchenko to replace him. Tierney made 27 appearances but only 6 starts in the league, and after the season was sent on loan to Real Sociedad. He was a regular starter in San Sebastian, but 3 different minor injuries snipped at his minutes. He went to Euro 2024, but there too his tournament was curtailed by injury. The injury kept him out of the first part of the season just gone, making him impossible to loan out. Arteta actually utilised him a reasonable amount as a bench option, normally when he wanted to defend a lead. However, by now, most Gooners agreed that it was time to move him on, with the left-back options more sophisticated and less injury-prone than the Scot. His contract ran out, and he returned to Celtic, where he always looked most comfortable. There's no doubt green and white runs through his blood, and if he wasn't a footballer, he'd probably be a season ticket holder at Celtic Park. But to me, he's someone that definitely has the quality to play at a higher level than the Scottish Premiership, and the move is a bit unambitious. Most Arsenal fans don't have a bad word to say about Tierney, but would also agree that his injuries and the fact Arsenal have ample options there meant he was surplus to requirements. David Luiz, Fortaleza. Yes, David Luiz is still a footballer. Coming through the academy at Vitória, breaking into the first team in the 2006 season, where his club got promoted from Brazil's third tier, he was loaned to Benfica for the second half of the 2006-07 European season, and had established himself as a starter at centre-back by the end of it, leading to him being signed permanently for €1.5 million. However, he was injured for most of the 07-08 campaign, playing just 13 times. After he returned to injury, he was used regularly for the next season, including the cup final as they beat Sporting on penalties. The season after that, Benfica won a league and cup double, with Luiz at its heart. On the eve of the 10-11 season, he earned his first Brazil cap too. Having played every game for Benfica, in winter he was bought by Chelsea for €25 million. Luiz had a brilliant start to life at Stamford Bridge and finished it off with a trip to Copa America, though he did not play due to injury. He also had an injury-hit 11-12 season, starting injured, ending injured, but playing regularly in the middle. Despite missing the last 6 games of the Premier League with injury, as well as the FA Cup final, which Chelsea won 2-1 against Liverpool, he returned for the Champions League final, playing every minute as the Blues beat Bayern Munich on penalties. In 12-13 too, he was fantastic, and sometimes deployed as a defensive midfielder, including for the whole game as they beat his old club Benfica 2-1 to win the Europa League. He also finished it off by playing every game as Brazil won their home Confederations Cup. Everything looked good for Luiz, with a home World Cup pending, and he sometimes wore the armband as well for the Seleção. In 13-14, his time was limited a bit by niggling injuries. He played every minute at the home World Cup, wearing the armband in their infamous 7-1 loss to Germany in the semi-final. Instantly, Luiz, who cried in the aftermath, became a meme, with his eccentric hair, play acting, a notable incident where he writhed in pain against Man U with a smile on his face, and now part in the 7-1 loss. People forgot just how world class he had been. Before the tournament, Chelsea had sold him to PSG for £50 million. He was a regular for Le Parisien as they won a domestic treble, but saw his time with Brazil cut, including at the Copa America. The season after that, they won the domestic quadruple, and he again started normally but for injuries, but was left out of the Copa America squad. He would win just one more cap for Brazil in a friendly at the end of the next season against Australia. Incidentally, that season he had returned to Chelsea for £34 million, and in his first season was pretty brilliant as the Blues won the Premier League. The season after, he had persistent injuries, which cost him a place in the FA Cup final, which Chelsea won. He returned to action in the 18-19 season, among the first names on the team sheet, with his last game for the Blues being the Europa League final, which he played in full as, of course, Chelsea won. Luiz was then sold to the club he helped vanquish for £8 million. This transfer was seen pretty negatively, as a history of unwanted Blues players going to Arsenal continued. This perception that Arsenal take Chelsea's leftovers has pervaded for what must be at least a decade now, with the likes of Petr Cech before Luiz and Willian after, and I think that contributed to the negativity regarding the recent transfer of Noni Madueke. Most remember Luiz as a meme in Arsenal's banter years, which definitely included Emery's tenure, but actually he was pretty good for Arsenal, and most of their fans respect the job he did. He still had a couple of high-profile stinkers, managing to give away 5 penalties, but he was first name on the team sheet for the Gunners in 1920, and with good reason, starting the FA Cup final, and at the very least he was a snip for £8 million. He had a few small injuries in the 2021 season which limited his minutes, and after that, his contract ended. He joined Flamengo for the end of the 2021 season, playing the whole of the Copa Libertadores final, which they lost to Palmeiras. He was used sparingly in the 2022 campaign, but did play the Libertadores final against Atletico Paranaense, which they won 1-0. He joins a very short list of players to have won both the Champions League and the Libertadores. In 2023 too, he was used in rotation, but was used more in 2024 when his contract ran out. He was then signed by Fortaleza, who he hasn't played much for due to injuries. Honestly, fair play to him for keeping on age 38. And despite being seen as a hilarious sideshow Bob character by some, it's clear that Luiz was actually one of the finest defenders of his generation, and a figure that deserves respect. He has been part of sides which won the title in Portugal, France, and England, plus a Champions League, Copa Libertadores, and 57 caps for the most famous national team in the world. I think when the story of Luiz is written, most people will accept that. But we all saw the mistakes, the rash tackles, and red cards which were part of his game. The period at Arsenal is really not something that many will remember. Those that support the club are normally quite positive towards him, but it did fit his unfair reputation at the time. A banter club for a banter player. Now Arsenal have shed that status, and Luiz has too. Out of sight, out of mind in Brazil. Most people are fairer about his career. So, that's it. A lot more players came to Arsenal during Emery's time, but as academy members, and most of them are unremembered. Only Karl Hein made it to the first team, and only then he really feels like a technicality with one appearance. Does the modern era of Arsenal start with Emery or Arteta? Arsène Wenger's reign lasted from 1996 to 2018, and Emery therefore feels like he might be a new era. For one, he took over for a new season, rather than Arteta, who took over midway through after Emery got sacked. Does the current Arsenal epoch really start midway through the 1920 season? A lot of players left under Emery too. Sandy Cazorla, Jack Wilshere, Per Mertesacker, Jeff Rain Adelaide, Chuba Akpom, Lucas Perez and Joel Campbell were the senior players who were cleared out in Emery's first season, with Petr Cech, Lick Steiner, Aaron Ramsey, Danny Welbeck, David Ospina, Takuma Asano, Laurent Koscielny, Cole Jenkinson, Alex Iwobi, and Nacho Monreal leaving in his second. That's a huge list of players, and obviously Emery's influence on the current squad comes from Saliba and Martinelli, genuine gifts from the Spaniard to his compatriot Mikel Arteta. The real verdict on Emery's time was that it was a false start. The last years of Wenger were toxic. Fueled by viral rants on AFTV, fans turned against a man who was once a god in North London. Some still defended Wenger, leading to fans turning against each other too, but it was clear that the majority wanted him out. However, the vague sense of hopelessness was compounded by a board that seemed unwilling to spend properly, while mega-rich sides like Chelsea and City marched onwards. Emery, then, was meant to be a change. Here was a modern coach who knew his way around the Europa League, which Arsenal needed to win to be back in the Champions League, or finish in the top four. He brought in an impressive suite of players in Leno, Torreira, Guendouzi, Papastathopoulos, and even Lichtsteiner. The Kroenkes, the long maligned majority shareholders, had now complete control, and said that with it, they were willing to spend. The first months were brilliant. After a 5-1 win away to Fulham, when Arsenal genuinely played some of the best football ever seen in a Premier League game, and no, that isn't hyperbole, fans sang, "We got our Arsenal back." Watch the highlights of that game if you don't believe me. However, it was not to be for Emery. They fell apart in the run-in, missing out on the top four, and were shell-shocked in the Europa League final in Baku, losing 4-1 to Chelsea, meaning they missed the Champions League, qualification for which was the main target of Emery's appointment, even stated by the club themselves. The form was patchy in 1920, and a few months in he was sacked. It is not true that Emery laid the building blocks for Arteta's success, and yes, it is success, despite the lack of silverware so far. Of his signings, only two, Saliba and Martinelli, are part of the Arteta project, and both did not feature regularly until Emery was gone. What Emery really is an interregnum between two eras. Like Bruce Rioch was an awkward bridge between George Graham and Arsène Wenger, so too is Emery between Wenger and Arteta. Unlike Rioch, however, who spent the rest of his managerial career pottering about the English lower divisions and strange odysseys to the USA and Denmark, Emery has been a fantastic manager nearly everywhere else, though some blamed the foreign environment and his struggles to adapt to the language, with his trademark introduction, "Good evening," widely lampooned. His success at Aston Villa shows that he can win in England. Ultimately, though, whatever the cause, his time at Arsenal was objectively a failure by every metric, and things got worse before they finally got better under Arteta. Thanks for watching. A pretty interesting list of players. What are your reflections of the Emery reign? Are you an Arsenal fan? If not, does your club have a manager that feels like this? A strange bridge between eras? Is there another manager whose reign I should cover next in similar style through the medium of transfers? Let me know in the comments.